Dumping is a kind of predatory pricing, especially in the context of international trade. It occurs when manufacturers exporting goods at a lower price to another country, which is below the price charged in its home market or below its cost of production. This is also an action of selling goods and services below its normal value. As dumping usually involves substantial export volumes of the product, it often has the effect of endangering the financial viability of manufacturers or producers of the product in the importing nation. Trade dumping is considered intentional in nature in that the primary purpose is to gain an advantage within the market that imports the goods by increasing market share in a foreign market or to drive out competition. The identification of trademarking can be performed simply by comparing the sales price of a good in its market of origin. Steel, one of the most innovative and flexible alloys, which can be customized for nearly any requirement. Variants of steel are used in housing, transportation, industrial, automobile, infrastructure and utility sectors, making it one of the world's most versatile materials that can easily be reused and recycled. China, the first largest steel producer in the world, produced 808.4 million tons of steel in 2016, which is about 49.6% of the global output. China is only the world's largest steel producer, but also the largest consumer of steel. It topped the list of users of finished steel products with 46.2% of world total steel products is used. European Union, the second largest producer of steel in the world after China, with its output is over 177 million tons a year, accounting for 11% of global output. Steel production in China witnessed explosive growth in the decade after year 2000. In 2006, China shifted from being a net importer of steel to become a net exporter of steel products. Also in 2006, China replaced Japan as both the biggest steel exporting country and the biggest net steel exporting country in the world. China exported more than 100 million tons of steel products to the world market in 2015. These exports have helped to ease overcapacity pressures in China's domestic steel industry. At the same time, rising dependence on global sales has increased related trade tensions with other steel-producing countries. In 2015, there were 37 cases relating to anti-dumping and anti-subsidy launched against China by major steel-producing countries. This raises questions about China's competitiveness in steel products on the world market, and reactions to it by other steel-producing countries, like increasing anti-dumping cases against China's steel exports.
Due to China's steel dumping, EU steel sector is facing challenging times. Many plants and steel factories have reduced their production that caused the decline of domestic steel production and employment. Steel production in Germany, which is the biggest steel consumer in the EU, decreased 1.6% in February 2015. In UK, steel production dropped from year 2007 to 2012, was at about 10 million tons, before rising again in year 2013. Unemployment in EU had increased because of steel dumping. European officials say as many as 40,000 steel jobs has been lost in recent years. EU faced 750 steel jobs lost in Port Talbot, a total of 1,015 jobs lost in 300 other locations. In October 2015, total 1,200 jobs lost in Tata Saks and Scramble and Lanarkshire. The future of 11,000 staff became unclear. In the same month, 2,200 jobs gone and closed the red cast steel work. As overall, the industry of steel work lost 5,000 jobs in less than 1 year of the total of 30,000 workforce in UK. global price become lower. About half of the 1.6 billion tons of steel made globally each year come from China, giving it huge pricing power. China has flooded the market with cheap and subsidized steel. Critics say it would be a license for China to dump product at unfairly low price in Europe. Steel import into the UK from the rest of the EU cost on average €897 a ton in 2014, while China's steel import was just €583 a ton. EU steel industry has been battered by falling steel prices, high energy costs, cheap import and the strength of the pound, which have made export expensive and import increase. Steel overcapacity in international market. China has a domestic steel overcapacity of around 400 million tons, almost 3 times the total demand in the EU of 155 million tons. A massive surge in China's steel import is hitting Europe. The Euro Commission announced that it had established a system for import of steel products to protect its own steel industry. The EU has previously said that import from countries like China has jeopardized its own labor market. On 6 April 2017, it has set higher anti-dumping duty on steel from China. The Commission's investigation confirmed that this product has been sold in Europe at heavily dumped prices. The duty target hot rolled flat steel products. The Commission said it had set final duty of between 18.1 and 35.9% for China's steel products. The Commission said the raised duty should shield EU steelmakers from the damaging effect of China dumping during an initial period of 5 years. It will not impose provisional duty on the same product from Brazil, Iran, Russia, Serbia, and Ukraine for now. An investigation of import from this country will continue for another 6 months.
Subsidy investigations of steel exports from China.
Actually, there was a saying that is, if you look at
European Union ranking the Lunar New Year in less celebratory.
Friday, it had established a system for imports of steel products to protect.
Today, that is seriously concerned about Europe's increased protectionism.
The really big issue, the elephant in the room, if you say, is the dumping of steel, the price of steel globally, and therefore, as a result, the rise globally in trade defence instruments and putting up barriers to trade. So we're seeing that across the globe. Some countries, some regions are quicker and better than others, and that creates a problem, and I can expand upon that. But why are we seeing a rise in trade defence instruments? Well, it's because China last year exported something like 112 million tons of steel onto the global market. China is a sector which is 70% state-owned, which we understand loses something like $34 per ton of steel that they make. So what they're doing there is not putting onto the market cheap, really cheap steel. What they're doing is putting onto the market underpriced, state-supported, unfairly traded steel, and that's not sustainable going forward. There's much more robust and higher tariffs to tackle it. So picking up 9% tariffs on rebar entering from China into the EU, that's not really going to help. That's not going to tackle the problem when the actual calculated dumping margin is 66%. Perhaps we do need legislative change. So what we need, if we're thinking about, say, the lesser duty rule, the Commission would like to remove the lesser duty rule, which would enable the Commission to come up with more robust tariffs. But member states, or certain member states, including the UK, are blocking the scrapping of the lesser duty rule. So what we actually need, it's not just on the Commission, it doesn't all lie with, come on Commission, speed things up. It actually also lies with member states. And so we would call on the UK government to stop opposing the scrapping of the lesser duty rule, to actually turn around completely and say, yeah, we do need probably to get rid of the lesser duty rule so we can have realistic tariffs on imported steel into the European Union that would actually really would tackle the problem in the short term. Trade defence instruments aren't for the longer term, but certainly in the short term, they are the answer to the problem that we have. And we're going to see a raft of other trade defence instruments springing up all over the world, and we're almost seeing that on a weekly basis now, and that's going to continue. So if we ignore that at our peril.
But China is the driver to reduce the world price of steel. There's no question about that. The world price, China is a leader in terms of leading the price down. I don't really think that is through dumping. You know, if you test the Chinese steel prices in domestic prices versus export prices, their domestic prices are same or cheaper than their export prices. So, you know, it's not like they're selling at a high price domestically and dumping it in the world. China doesn't do that. China is not exporting steel at much lower prices than it sells domestically. They have the world's best steel plants now because they're the newest. So they have large scale plants, so they have the lowest cost of production. They're just very good at making low cost steel. When they have a surplus, they are exporting. Actually, again, there is China is not very good at representing itself on the world stage, because when people talk about Chinese government providing subsidies for export, actually on the contrary, what they do is they actually tax exports. Because what they do is they have a 17% VAT tax in China. So they only allow a part of that to be refunded when steel is exported. So in effect, they actually tax exports. So I don't think China is dumping steel, in my opinion. Cheap Chinese steel has an impact on the world, has a detrimental effect on the world. And I think the only justification for protection would be, in my opinion, that steel is a cyclical commodity, and sooner or later steel will come back into rebalance. Prices will come back into reasonable, healthy level. And when that happens, in the interim, if you have destroyed your industry because of cheap imports, then it's very difficult to restart the industry, even though it's viable to produce steel again. China has made the cost of a lot of products globally much cheaper than they were, and that's a positive move for the world, for every economy, for the consumer. A lot of the products which we were used, a lot of costs have come down on a lot of products, including steel, because of Chinese mass production. And that's a positive thing for the world. It's not a negative thing. So, let's say some of the steel plants in the UK which are already closed, if they will never come back, in my opinion, even if the prices recover, because they will never recover to the degree which it allows enough profit to really regroup skills, labor, market share, investment. I mean, steel plants are like a human body. Once you take the soul out of the body, it's very difficult to restart them, and we've been through that. So that's the only justification for protection, that if you don't protect, then even when the market does return, which it will eventually, you won't be able to restart. But that's just because that's justification, not that China is dumping steel in the market. I don't think China is dumping steel in the market.